wife in Iowa when he lived in Iowa. Well, he's the one that he's living. I mean, he was shot. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. We're here today because the scam threat is real. We're all potential victims. The perpetrators are getting more bold, more ruthless, and more global by the day. Transnational organized crime groups are targeting all of us with industrial scale fraud. These aren't small-time lone wolf crooks. They're sophisticated criminal networks operating with precision across the borders. They exploit technology, including artificial technology, and are draining billions of dollars from Americans' household. Federal Trade Commission estimates that scammers stole $158 billion from Americans in 2023. Almost $62 billion of that was stolen from our senior citizens. $62 billion would fund the entire Department of Justice for a year and a half. It would fund all public university tuition for U.S. undergraduates for a year. So we're talking about a lot of money. So where's it going? Transnational crime networks are using American dollars for drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms trafficking, and other evil projects along that line. According to 2023 Gallup poll, scams are Americans' second highest crime concern, just after fear of identity theft. Nearly half of Americans say that they've encountered a cyber attack or a digital scam attempt. 8% of the U.S. adults, that's 21 million Americans, were scammed in the past year. That means more than 57,000 Americans are being scammed each day. Scammers are extremely convincing, and their tactics are very effective. Calls from foreign countries appear on cell phones at the local bank branch number, the local police department, or another trusted entity. Artificial intelligence needs just 17 words of a person's real voice to create an entire script that sounds like that individual. So it's believable then when a caller that sounds just like your child or grandchild claims to need a few $1,000s after an at-fault car accident or for some other reason. There's a scam out there designed to entrap each of us. Americans are pressured, coerced, coaxed, encouraged, or even romanced into emptying their savings, draining their retirement, and wiring funds to accounts controlled by criminal organizations in other countries. Crime groups in Nigeria are known for internet scams, and crime groups in India are known for tech support scams. Chinese gangs run scam centers in Southeast Asia where trafficked individuals are often forced to carry out scam efforts. Those scams affect all Americans, We focus this hearing on older Americans for a few reasons. First, older folks are suffering over a third of all scam losses. They often have accumulated more wealth than younger Americans, so they have more to lose. Second, seniors belong to a generation that's more likely to answer the phone and is more likely to experience loneliness and isolation directly related to age. Lastly, financial exploitation increases the risk of both physical and mental health issues, particularly for older people. People who have been scammed often experience shame, anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. They also have an increased risk of suicidal thoughts and actions. This isn't just a call to protect the elderly. It's a call to defend our country's integrity, its financial security, and a moral obligation to protect the innocent. Before I call on Senator Durbin, we're going to have a 2-minute video demonstrating what we all know is going on. Proceed with the video, please.
Mom, it's me. I'm in trouble.
It's your loved one's voice. They're in trouble. You'd do anything to help them.
They say they won't let me go unless you pay them.
But it's not actually them.
New software can recreate the voices of loved ones in distress, and scammers use that to ask for large sums of money.
The Federal Trade Commission says it's making AI robocalls a top priority and educating people on the issue.
Romance scams are skyrocketing. Complaints grew 25% from 2019 to 2021, according to the FBI.
My name is Eileen Charlotte. I am a fraud victim, and my story was featured in a Netflix documentary called The Tinder Swindler.
Romance scams are big business for criminals. They prey on your heartstrings.
Being a fraud victim is reality for millions of people worldwide, because 45% of all crimes is fraud. We are blamed, shamed, and named. But by blaming the victims, we always let the criminals win. So I'm asking you to take action now.
Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to apologize initially for being late for the hearing. We had a briefing, bipartisan briefing this morning that Senators Thune and Schumer sponsored to discuss the horrific assassination of elected officials in Minnesota over the weekend, and also the experience of a member of this subcommittee, Senator Padilla, in Los Angeles last Friday. It was a sobering presentation on the question of the assassination and the vulnerability of many people in public life today. I would say that it calls for action, and this committee is going to be at the heart of it. We are responsible for oversight for the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and I believe that we will be called on to consider legislation on the subject in a very timely fashion. So that is the reason I was late. It certainly is no disrespect for the important topic we are discussing. The amount of fraud perpetrated against older Americans is overwhelming. According to the FBI, people aged 60 and older reported 4.9 billion, that's billion, stolen through fraud with an average loss of $83,000 last year, up 43% from the previous year. Elder fraud is a growing threat, and it frequently goes unreported, as the chairman said, because of the victim's fear, embarrassment, or lack of resources. New technologies like cryptocurrency ATMs pose a heightened risk for older Americans. We're considering a cryptocurrency regulation bill on the floor today. We may even vote on it today. Many of us had amendments that we wanted to offer. Unfortunately, no amendments will be allowed by any member of the Senate. No amendments. My amendments was to regulate the safety of crypto ATMs. What are crypto ATMs? They're machines you may find in a grocery store or a shop where you do business. And it looks like you can buy a Bitcoin and that's all there is to it. There's much more to the story. Crypto ATMs look like a regular ATM. You find them in gas stations, grocery stores. The big difference is that instead of depositing money with your bank, a crypto ATM allows customers to purchase cryptocurrency, something called a Bitcoin. These crypto ATMs have become a favorite tool of scammers because once a victim purchases crypto and transfers it to a criminal's digital wallet, it is virtually impossible to trace or recover. These scammers might be using new technology, but they're following a very old playbook. They call their victim and pretend to be from the victim's bank, or they impersonate a government official. They may announce to the victim that they missed jury duty, and because of it, they have to pay a fine. And to avoid a trial and a fine, they go to a Bitcoin machine and deposit thousands of dollars. Sounds impossible? Happens all the time. They may say the victim owes money for skipping jury duty or needs to bail a loved one out of jail. It happened to my wife. She got a call from our grandson, and she was supposed to send money quickly because he'd been in an auto accident. She called me and said, "What do you think I should do?" And I said, "Let me ask our grandson who's standing next to me whether he was in an auto accident." And the answer obviously was no. It was a scam. They tell their victims all they need to do to make the problem go away is to pay a fine or a fee using the nearest crypto ATM. The scammer walks them through every step. Put in your money, buy your crypto, send it to the scammer's wallet. Crypto ATM scams led to nearly $247 million in losses in 2024, 31% increase over the previous year. And make no mistake, the crypto ATM companies know that their machines are involved in this fraud. One crypto ATM operator, Bitcoin Depot, wrote in an SEC filing, quote, "Our products and services may be exploited to facilitate illegal activity such as fraud, money laundering, gambling, tax evasion, and scams." That is a stunning admission in their own corporate product. But it gets worse. I don't want this to be personal, but I want the chairman to know it. An investigation by Iowa's own Attorney General found over 98% of the money that the people in Iowa reported sending through Bitcoin Depot was part of scam transactions. 98%. Can you imagine? Crypto ATMs aren't being exploited. They're being used as indicated and misused, obviously, over and over again. And cryptocurrency in general are also increasingly used for fraud. In 2024, the FBI reported crypto-related crimes up 66%. Americans lost $9.3 billion to crypto scammers. Nearly 150,000 complaints filed involving crypto fraud, including more than 6,000 complaints in my own home state, and more than a third of all crypto fraud complaints filed by Americans over the age of 50. Statistics alone can't paint a complete picture. In Illinois, an elderly woman with MS lost $40,000, her entire life savings. The woman could not get around very well. The scammer even called an Uber car to pick her up and drive her to the local crypto ATM. This heart-wrenching story and many more like it are the reason I introduced the Crypto ATM Fraud Prevention Act with Senators Blumenthal, Reed, and Welch. It would require crypto ATM operators to register with financial regulators, warn customers about scams, and create transaction limits so that customers won't lose their life savings. The bill also would require operators to refund new customers who've been defrauded. We've got to do more to protect the people who send us here to do this job, particularly vulnerable older Americans. For God's sake, they paid their dues. They went to work. They saved up meager savings and maybe have a little Social Security on the side, and they barely get by. To be ripped off by one of these frauds has got to be beyond embarrassing. It could be completely destructive of their lifestyle. I stand ready to work with Senator Grassley and my colleagues to address this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Miss April Helms, the daughter of a romance scam victim and a founding board member of a nonprofit called Advocating Against Romance Scammers. Following her mother's tragic death, Ms. Helms has dedicated her life to spreading awareness about romance scams and helping those victims. She's also host to a podcast called Scammers Stories, where she has interviewed over 100 people from all walks of life who have experienced scams. Miss Jolene Gunther, the National Director of AARP's Bank Safe Initiative, a comprehensive intervention platform that equips the financial services industry to prevent and stop financial exploitation of older adults. In her work, she engages frontline employees at banks, credit unions, investment firms, retailers, and other providers of financial products and services. Under her guidance, AARP's Bank Safe Initiative has trained 1 in 10 financial industry frontline employees who have saved older adults more than $100 million from exploitation. Ms. Gunther holds a JD degree from University of Utah, master's degree in social work from Washington University in St. Louis. After Ms. Gunther, we have Joshua Berque, the Executive Director of the Industry Traceback Group and Vice President Policy and Advocacy at the US Telecom, the Broadband Association. Through the Traceback Group, Mr. Berque leads an effort to identify the source and stop illegal calls. In his U.S. Telecom role, he heads U.S. Telecom's policy development and advocacy on digital trust and consumer protection. Before joining U.S. Telecom, Mr. Berque was a partner at the D.C. telecommunications law firm's privacy practice, where he worked on automatic calling related legal, regulatory, and policy issues. Brady Finta, founder and CEO of the National Elder Fraud Coordination Center, where Mr. Finta served in the FBI for almost 25 years, where his work focused on combating organized crime, gangs, and child pornography. He also served as supervisor of the Cross-Border Violence Task Force, where he specialized in transnational organized crime investigations, including kidnappings, murders, cartel finance, and money laundering. In 2018, he established the FBI's San Diego Elder Justice Task Force, and this year he opened and leads the National Elder Fraud Coordination Center. The center combats scams by aggregating and analyzing private and public sector through an organized crime lens. It ties cases together and creates high-dollar investigative packages of federal law enforcement investigation. Now, before you begin your testimony, we swear members at this hearing, so please rise so I can give the oath. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? They've all answered positively. Ms. Helms, start out.
Thank you, Senator Grassley and Senator Durbin, for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is April Helm. I'm here because my mother, Sherry Tyson, lost $350,000 to a romance scam before her passing in 2020 while undergoing treatment for late-stage ovarian cancer. It's been a long, frustrating, and heartbreaking journey that has brought me to this moment. And before I share the details, I want to express just how surreal it is that I'm sitting here with you today. In 2018, while undergoing cancer treatment, she became even more isolated, more susceptible. One day, while I was headed to a football game in my hometown, I received a text from her. It said, "I gave all my money away. I have nothing. Come get me." I was in shock. She promised, but she had lost her apartment, her car, everything. I told her she could move in with me, but on one condition, and that was she couldn't talk to the scammer in my house. She refused. She couldn't let go of the fantasy they'd sold her. Instead, she moved in with her sister in Mobile, Alabama. And when that didn't work out, she asked me to come get her so she could start fresh in Dallas with my brother. We made a plan to move her that day. But scammers had another plan. One of their tactics is to keep victims awake all night, exhausted and disoriented. That morning, as my aunt and my mother were preparing to leave, my aunt, who's sitting behind me today, found her collapsed on the floor. She never made it to Dallas. I believe with all of my heart that if it weren't for the scam, I would have seen my mother that day. In the early days, there was almost no information online about these scams. As someone with a background in radio news, I launched a podcast to investigate, to talk with other victims, law enforcement, and experts. I've interviewed people of all ages and professions who were deceived, smart people, a former CIA agent. She lost $1 million. A son of a marriage counselor who lost money. A woman who was married to a retired colonel. This crime isn't just happening to the elderly. It's happening to people my age and younger. A woman my age in Oklahoma recently made national news because her scam turned her into a money mule, like many do. And she's now facing up to 62 years in prison. I've interviewed the scammers themselves, too. One told me they like to target Americans because we have money and because of what we did with slavery. Many victims go to local authorities only to be told there's no crime because they gave their money away. Victims feel abandoned, penniless, ashamed, and taxed heavily for withdrawing their retirement savings. Some even take their own lives under the weight of the despair. Today, I serve on the board of Advocating Against Romance Scammers, a national nonprofit focused on prevention, education, and advocacy. My mother deserved better. Every victim does. We urgently need Congress to act to ensure no more families are shattered by this cruel and complex crime. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to my mother's story.
Good morning. My name is Jelaine Gunther, and I am the National Director of AARP's BankSafe Initiative. I'm honored to speak with you today on behalf of more than 100 million Americans aged 50 and older. I've spent my career working to prevent fraud, starting in a prosecutor's office, then at the state level in Utah, and now nationally at AARP. Congress's work addressing fraud has really opened up opportunities for prevention, from providing immunity for reporting fraud when financial institutions train their staff, to encouraging the sharing of industry promising practices. And we're seeing the results. AARP's BankSafe program builds on the goals of those laws. We partner with 1,500 financial institutions to stop exploitation before the money leaves the account. The free training we created with the industry, paired with policy adoption, has helped prevent more than $450 million from ever being stolen from consumers. But this fight is personal. It's in my DNA. My grandfather was a banker and a victim. In his 90s, someone was taking cash from his wallet. My uncle, also a banker, noticed the red flags. And in a move only a banker would think of, he planted a die pack in my grandfather's wallet. Our family literally caught the thief red-handed. Most families aren't that lucky. They don't have bankers, and they don't have die packs. So that's why I built a program at the very bank where my grandfather worked, so other families wouldn't have to rely on luck to protect the people they love. Because fraud isn't an accident. It's a crime, and it's happening at a devastating scale. The FTC reports older adults lose between $7 billion and $62 billion a year. In a blink of an eye, someone can lose their entire retirement savings. The financial industry can be the last line of defense, but only if we give them the authority to act. Let me tell you a story about Brittany. She's a young college student working as a bank teller. After taking AARP's training, she noticed a man acting strangely. He wanted to withdraw all of his money from his account, and he kept on going outside to take calls. She slowed things down, asked the right questions, and she said to me, I wouldn't have caught it without the bank safe training. Her actions protected this man's life savings of $50,000. And this isn't rare. A study found that BankSafe trained staff save 16 times more money than those without the BankSafe training. But we're still leaving tools on the table. Today, most financial institutions can't delay a suspicious transaction unless their state specifically allows it. Yet, according to the American Bankers Association, 90% of institutions in those states say holds would be beneficial. A study also confirmed that delaying and holding transactions like the one that Brittany used are among the most effective frontline tools. But there are outdated regulations that really tie the hands of the very people best positioned to act in real time. Meanwhile, criminals are coordinating across telecom, tech, social media, and the financial industry, while we ask these same sectors to work in silos. We need a federal coordinated response under your leadership to make this happen. That means empowering financial institutions to delay suspicious transactions without fear of liability, enabling the real-time information sharing of fraud, and requiring social media, tech, and telecom platforms to become part of the solution, not hiding places for criminals. Australia is already doing this, and it's working. Scam losses dropped 43% after they launched a national response. And this isn't just about stopping theft. It's about protecting trust, preventing negative impacts to business and government, and ensuring the independence of adults in the final years of their life. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for your leadership on this critical issue. Your continued partnership is vital to sustaining the vigilance, innovation, and coordination we need to fight the scammers exploiting the American people. I'm Josh Berkue, Executive Director of the Industry Traceback Group, or ITG, the FCC designated entity to trace back unlawful robocalls, and Senior Vice President at U.S. Telecom. I've also served on the Aspen Institute's Task Force for Fraud and Scam Prevention and the FTC's Scams Against Older Adults Advisory Group. The communications industry has been making meaningful progress confronting scam robocalls. We've deployed tools like call blocking and labeling, stir-shaken call authentication, and traceback. We are leveraging these tools in the fight against ever more personalized fraud schemes. Traceback helps us identify the actors behind fraud calls and has supported dozens of civil and criminal enforcement actions at every level of government. We know the combination of identifying bad actors responsible, including through traceback, and then holding them accountable works. A couple stats here. Raids of Indian call centers in 2016 led to an overnight 85% drop in IRS scam robocalls. And a similar Canada-India crackdown in 2018 led to a 77% decline in similar calls to Canadians. Today, thanks to coordinated action by industry and government, Many of the most disruptive, high-volume scam calls no longer reach vulnerable Americans at the same scale. Indeed, scam robocalls are down over 50% from their 2021 peak. But today's fraudsters aren't blasting millions of robocalls impersonating the IRS or Social Security Administration. They're targeting individuals with live calls and finely tuned deception. They spoof bank numbers and pose as fraud teams. They impersonate loved ones and local officials to steal from their victims. And as we've already heard today, in the case of older adults, they can rip away what their victims spent a whole life building. We are not powerless against these devastating scams. It used to take law enforcement months to determine who made an illegal call, and now through ITG tracebacks, we often find those criminals within hours or days. That speed and scalability allow us to keep pace with today's fast-moving fraud. In recent years, we have proactively expanded our work beyond telecom. Our collaborative cross-sector partnerships have broadened traceback's reach and relevance as a tool for disruption, and they could be a difference maker in building actionable criminal cases. While we can't undo what's been done, we can go after the bad guys and prevent further harm. The threat of foreign actors exploiting U.S. networks is not new, but their tactics are evolving. Increasingly, we trace calls to foreign actors posing as U.S.-based entities, forming shell LLCs, and in some cases impersonating real companies, all tactics designed to evade scrutiny. Criminal enforcement remains essential to deter these groups that are orchestrating these scams. Some tactics, like SimBox is used to route calls from abroad, require actors to be present in the U.S., creating a rare opportunity for enforcement. Turning that vulnerability into a point of disruption and deterrence should be a clear priority. We're responding aggressively, but we cannot make arrests or prosecute the criminals even when we identify them. That's where we need government support. There are three things Congress can do that would make a meaningful difference. First, establish a national anti-scam strategy with a designated federal lead or task force. We need a coordinated federal response, and we need to treat scams as what they are, crimes. Our strategy must prioritize cross-border criminal enforcement. Second, provide a safe harbor for improved fraud prevention and detection. Emerging partnerships across industry sectors are showing real promise in identifying and disrupting scams. A well-scoped safe harbor could unlock deeper collaboration. Third, support and scale what works. As scams evolve, we need to double down on tools and partnerships that have shown real results. While we've made progress, fraud continues to take a toll. We must now focus on turning progress into impact, helping to deter, disrupt, and penalize fraud, ensuring the criminals can't target another victim. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Senators. There was a time not long ago when Americans felt comfortable answering the phone and talking to strangers. We weren't suspicious of every number we didn't already know, and skeptical that every text or email might be an elaborate scheme to steal from us. Fraud has become ubiquitous in our country. For hundreds of thousands of older Americans every year, it has a life-altering effect, causing them to lose their life savings, damage their mental and physical health, withdraw from society, and even to commit suicide. As the chairman said, the FTC estimated losses just to our elders at over $62 billion a year. Some of these losses included both of my parents. Where does it go? Transnational organized crime groups overseas, some in countries who are our nation's adversaries. This is a national security threat we as a country are not effectively mitigating. It's most clearly manifest in the annual statistics from both the FBI and FTC that show dramatic increases year after year, particularly among our elders. I'm unaware of any other crime which victimizes a particular demographic of Americans at these levels. I think it's time to admit that what we're doing is not enough to stop or even slow the progression of this crime. We have to do something more dramatic. I'd like to make some recommendations on things our government could do to address this enormous problem. First, we should better leverage America's private sector efforts. Fortunately, many of America's companies already have capable anti-fraud and vulnerable persons programs, and they're highly skilled at using this data to uncover fraud. But these companies have only a small piece of the elder fraud puzzle. And this puzzle among companies is not getting put together on a regular basis. The same is true with law enforcement. Agencies are not sharing information enough, and even different departments in the same agencies aren't sharing enough. Next, we should build a network of elder justice task forces across America, EJTFs. As a nation, we've created task forces to combat internet crimes against children, terrorists, drug trafficking, and gangs, but not to counter those criminal organizations victimizing our parents and grandparents at an epidemic level. The power to change this dynamic is within our grasp by creating these task forces and teaming them up with the public sector. Historically, state and local law enforcement have had little or no role in investigating transnational organized elder fraud cases. However, their investigative resources are crucial in the solution to this problem because there's just not enough federal agents to adequately counter this threat. Combining these resources will allow for more mutually supporting investigations across the country, as well as prosecution of co-conspirators committing state crimes. This would create the capacity to better handle the enormous number of complaints. Linking the work of these EJTFs and some national oversight would make a more effective and efficient mitigation. We should build a support network for these EJTFs. Each one would need the support of a law enforcement coordination center in that region, aggregating and analyzing the elder fraud complaints collected by the various law enforcement agencies in that area, and combine them with complaints from Adult Protective Services, IC3, FTC, and the like. These leads can be analyzed, prioritized, and used to initiate substantial investigations. Proof of this concept lies within the San Diego Elder Justice Task Force and the Elder Justice Coordination Center that supports that task force. Once created, these EJTFs would have the support and the resources of the National Elder Fraud Coordination Center, a clearinghouse designed to aggregate and analyze and elevate the efforts of the private sector. Coupling the EJTFs with this coordination center would give America's companies the ability to contribute at scale to the elder fraud fight and allow for law enforcement to develop bigger, more impactful investigations faster. Building this network would be a massive first step in bending the curve of elder fraud in America, keeping billions in the accounts of older Americans and inside the U.S. economy. Thank you for your time. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank each of you for your testimony, and I'll start, and then Senator Durbin, and back and forth that way. 5 minutes each. Mr. Finna, requiring fast and efficient sharing of data and intelligence is very important. What are the biggest breakdowns in information sharing between federal, state, and local agencies when it comes to elder investigations? Would a more formalized information sharing hub or federal coordinating mandate help track and take down transnational scam networks more effectively? I think you've touched on this already, but this gives you an opportunity to expand.
Absolutely, Senator. I appreciate the question. I believe it's the only way to make an impact on this crime is to have a whole of society approach and a coordinated approach to this. And I'll give a perfect example. In just San Diego County, 12 different law enforcement agencies, all independently siloed, not sharing information on any of these cases. Until we put that together with a coordination center, you didn't realize that victims in Carlsbad and Coronado and El Cajon and Santee and San Diego were all victimized by the same criminal enterprise, not being investigated by any one of those individual departments or federal agencies. Unless we do this nationally, I do not think we're going to be able to get ahead of this crime that grows every single year. However, I do believe we do have the assets nationally between our public and private sectors and these efforts. If we put them together, I think we could create real impact.
More time for you with this question. How does the National Elder Fraud Coordination Center make a difference, and what can Congress learn from your efforts?
So the National Elder Fraud Coordination Center, we call it NEFC, essentially focuses on pre-existing efforts, predominantly in the private sector. And I'll give you another example. Amazon does investigations into fraud and vulnerable persons programs. They come up with a certain number of selectors related to the bad guys in their investigations. We take those selectors and we share them with telecoms, banks, other nonprofits, other different financial institutions, tech companies, and we aggregate the information that they've collected on those same selectors in order to present to law enforcement. What that does is it gives law enforcement a huge jump start in a type of investigation that would normally take months and months and months to get to that point, saving effort and making each case more impactful.
Mr. Berque, a recent survey sponsored by Google said 53% of Americans report receiving at least one scam call per day. What should we be doing as a nation to regain trust in our telecommunications system and to protect citizens from the growing rates of scam calls?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think our industry shares that concern. We all want the same thing. Calls people want getting through, calls people don't want getting through, and that's what the industry has really been focused on. I think the way to really focus on that is we really do have to go after the bad guys. We've built a lot of protections in the network. There's been a lot of enforcement against enablers of that, and what we see is that the criminals behind this just keep adapting and finding new pathways. So I think that's really got to be part of the answer, going after the bad guys.
Ms. Gunther, 13 different agencies currently play some role in collecting data about and fighting scams. There's criticism that they operate in silos, and there's a lot of talk lately about the need to centralize data collection about scams. How might it bolster our law enforcement efforts if financial institutions were able to report fraud to a central repository accessible by law enforcement authorities and financial institutions?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It's a great point. Right now, we're very siloed. The IC3 with the FBI is collecting data, the FTC is collecting data, and then the Department of Treasury is. And those really need to be aggregated together so that people can report into that and we can understand more and more about what's happening in this area. So that we can have better statistics and know what these criminal networks are doing. And I think one of the biggest barriers to that is really the privacy concerns that they have with financial institutions not being able to share information because of consumer privacy regulations.
Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I listened to your testimony, and I'm glad to hear all of it, and I think we're all on the same page. The one thing that I'm surprised is if there was any reference to crypto ATMs, I didn't hear it. I think that's the new device that's being used with great success by the scam artist. And I would just refer again to my neighboring state of Iowa, represented by the chairman. Their attorney general is on this case, looking at crypto ATM. An investigation by the Iowa Attorney General's office found over 98% of the money Iowans reported sending to Bitcoin Depot were part of a scam transaction. 98%. It gets worse. CoinFlip, another one of these operations, 95% for fraudulent transactions. These aren't real. I had a vaping shop in my hometown of Springfield, Illinois. I asked them to finally remove the crypto ATM machine because the owner was so embarrassed by the older people who came in there crying, tearing up, screaming, putting money into a machine, believing that they were saving themselves from a criminal prosecution. I mean, it's an outrage. So, Ms. Gunther, you know what I did with my bill because I worked with AARP to do it. Do you support it?
Yes, we do support it, and we've seen firsthand at AARP how victims are being funneled to these crypto ATMs by people, a variety of criminals. And what criminals do is they want to go to those transactions because there are no guardrails to these, right? There's no trained staff like you have.
No do-over.
Yep, no do-over. There are no consumer warnings, and there's no clawback. And that's why it's so important to have those guardrails. It's the same that we have guardrails in our traditional financial industry with banks and credit unions. We've seen that with BankSafe, when there's friction in the system, it gives people that pause to think something's wrong. And so by putting those frictions in the system with crypto ATMs, it will help cut down on fraud. But I think we really can't get to it until we get to the front end of the issue, which is trying to figure out how to cut it off, the communication from the criminals that are using this social media, tech, and telecom company platforms to communicate with consumers.
What percentage is using a telephone now for these scam transactions?
You know, I don't know that specific statistics, but I'm happy to get that for you for our office.
Mr. Berku, how much?
I don't know for sure either, but you know, it is something that we're continuing to focus on is when that communication comes through a phone call.
So when I warn senior citizens who are worried about these scams, be very doubtful of that telephone call. You're not going to get the telephone call from the Veterans Administration or the Social Security Administration. They're making it up. It's all phony, and they're trying to get you to do something you shouldn't do. I can recall getting a call from my bank, and they said, "We're just checking a suspicious transaction." By the time of the end of the phone call, it was clear it was a scam. I told the fellow I just wasn't going to follow through, and he had some choice words for me. But is it safe to warn senior citizens to be extremely doubtful and careful when they receive this telephone communication?
I think, unfortunately, the current status of fraud, it is good to have everyone on their toes. I know AARP just launched a new campaign. I can't quote it, but it's pause and listen. So I think that's really good recommendations. And one thing I always tell people, if it's the bank calling, tell them you're going to hang up and call back the bank's public number, and if they protest, it's not the bank.
That'll be the end of the story. So if anybody asks you for a Social Security number over telephone, what's the answer?
No, thank you.
Never do it. How about passwords to get into your accounts?
That I would recommend against that as well.
Let me ask you about the crypto issue, Mr. Fenta. You seem to be aware of it yourself.
Yes, sir. Yes, Senator. Very common in pretty much every transnational elder fraud case now. It's kind of hard to find one without crypto transactions, and specifically the ATMs.
I think some 13 states now have put in safeguards by their state law. Because I cannot offer an amendment to the crypto bill, there'll be no amendments. I won't even be able to raise this issue on a national basis. We ought to do it once and for all. This is a classic example of an amendment which, when I was here a few years ago, would have been accepted on a bipartisan basis. We're trying to establish some safety when it comes to these scam transactions. But we were being allowed by the crypto industry no amendments, none, to this bill. Take it or leave it.
Senator Moody.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. I am one of the newest members of the Senate. As you can see, I am sitting at the kids' table down here, the most junior member of this committee, but the most excited because I was a former federal prosecutor, a judge, the Attorney General of the great state of Florida, and now I get the opportunity to take all of that I've learned and experienced, especially as it relates to seniors and some of the issues we're talking about, and delve in on a nationwide basis. And I want to thank you because as I'm hearing you, you're coming up with real solutions and recommendations, pointing out challenges in the way we are structured and the way we share information, the way we might approach this in a more organized, efficient way. And I haven't heard once that the way we can fix this is to throw a ton of money at the situation. In fact, I think I heard multiple times we have the resources, we're just not using them in the best way. And so as I have been here now for almost 5 months, one thing that continues to shock me is that we will sit through these hearings and will be, and I believe I've sat on a hearing of similar substance, and going down the line, we need more money, we need more money, if you only give us more money, if you only give us more money. And it seems pretty now obvious how we have ended up as a nation with $36 trillion in debt, because there is a culture now here in Washington, and I guess it is now expected by everyone, to fix a problem. The only way to do that is you just throw endless amounts of cash at it. And I have found over the course of my career in working with law enforcement and interest groups as to particular law enforcement issues that sometimes it's a leadership issue, or it's a coordination issue, or it's a structure issue. And it might take a lot less money if we fix that problem first. And so, thank you. This is a refreshing morning of people who know what they're talking about, genuinely offering solutions that doesn't just include throwing endless amounts of cash at a situation. And I want to echo something that Ms. Helm said. This problem spans all walks of life. Smart people are falling for these issues. And I think the specific reason seniors are targeted is because they have life savings. And sometimes they are not as adept or skilled at using rapidly evolving technology, whether that is to safeguard their assets that they're trying to manage online, or whether they're not used to using social media platforms in a way that is safe. So this is a challenge. As Attorney General, I noticed very quickly that our federal agencies and many times have a limit or a loss where they will actually prosecute. And sometimes that could be $5 million. And while the average person might lose what seems to be a little bit amount to a federal agency, when accumulated amongst all the victims, it could in fact exceed that, but we're not sharing information and we don't know what that true loss is. So in Florida, as Attorney General, we set out to create the first of its kind in the nation at a statewide level, working with our individual counties of law enforcement and even then our cities, to make sure they knew that there was a state-level resource to share this information, these victims, so we could accumulate that data and go after. And we saw some success right away. You have the skilled people at the statewide level that were able to help their local jurisdictions and law enforcement. And if it met a certain threshold, then start working with the federal government when they would take that. And I'll start with you, Mr. Raku. I think you alluded to this. Do you believe that having a federal approach, or one person in charge of working with states at a statewide level to start developing the expertise and law enforcement acumen as it relates to cybercrime and cyber fraud and seniors is absolutely needed right now, because we're seeing more and more of these cases take place and could in fact exceed what would be a federal cutoff?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's right for federal leadership, for federal coordination with the states and across the federal government too, because even with the federal, the FTC, FBI, FCC, DOJ, they all have a role. And so just that we need a central coordinator that raises this issue to the level of prioritization it deserves.
And I'll turn to you, Mr. Fenta. You kept referencing the problem here are these silos. There's no information gathering. There's no organizational structure to have the folks that are dealing with it at a federal level interfacing with statewide, because most states don't have targeted teams like this. What would be your recommendation if one were to approach doing that at a federal level? Where would you even start?
I would basically start with what we already have. We've figured this problem out to some degree with respect to internet crimes against children. Right? We put ITAC task forces in every major city in the United States, predominantly staffed by state and local officers, with a vertical prosecution model, DA's office, U.S. Attorney's office working together. These ITACs are able to actually infuse the hundreds of thousands of leads they get every year. We could duplicate that with EJTFs and actually start to get our hands wrapped around this problem. And the thing that we don't understand, or that we're not seeing, is because there's so few cases right now, the amalgamation of the intelligence of those few cases will get dramatically heightened when you have more of those cases. So if we just mimicked that model and built these EJTFs, it would start to change things.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank my colleagues for the kind words about the murders that happened in Minnesota and the work that needs to be done going forward. The people we lost were tremendous people. And so I'll start with a question actually out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota, because they presented the evidence yesterday to the nation. In 2023, and they're fine people that work there, they successfully prosecuted 3 people who defrauded over 150,000 elderly victims across the country, stole nearly $300 million from them by convincing seniors to pay to enroll in fraudulent magazine subscriptions. It was one of the largest elder fraud schemes in our nation. Like Senator Moody, in my former life as a prosecutor, I actually started an elder white-collar crime division in our county attorney's office and know how bad this can be. Mr. Finta, what barriers do these government and law enforcement agencies face in seeking information necessary to fight scams, securing information?
Well, unfortunately, I think there's a pervasive thought process, particularly among our local law enforcement agencies. Hey, there's nothing we can do. Bad guys are overseas, money's in crypto, it's already gone. There is always something we can do, especially if we just start documenting these cases and working together. There's plenty of people in the United States who are co-conspirators in these criminal enterprises that are necessary for them to operate effectively. Those turn into great leads as soon as they get arrested.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Gunther, in 2022, Senator Collins and I actually passed a bill, Senior Fraud Prevention Act, to create an office in the FTC focused on fighting scams that target seniors, education, which some of you have referred to. Quickly, do you agree that investing resources targeted at stopping elder fraud scams is an effective strategy in trying to educate seniors?
I definitely think that educating seniors is part of the tools that we need to have. We know that it's effective when we're actually educating people, and there's different ways to educate people with behavioral tools so they're actually making changes and can recognize and spot those specific red flags of a scam. So we do think that, but there are other tools. We need to give tools to the financial industry to actually stop suspicious transactions, because education is not a one size fits all. We need to have a coordinated federal response. We need financial institutions to be able to stop and pause on the suspicious.
And then one of the things I'm concerned about is just slashing the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection budget by 13%, or effectively dismantling the CFPP, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. To me, that seems like a bigger problem, which is what's in the budget right now that we just received from the administration. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I can't comment on that, but I can put you in contact with someone from our office.
Okay, very good. But I just think we should realize what's going on. I want to turn quickly to AI. I actually have had in my someone I know well whose son serves in the Marines. He got a call when his son was deployed. That was his son's voice. It had been scraped off the internet. This isn't a senior scam, but we're seeing so much of this with seniors. And saying, I'm in trouble, I need money, basically. And he figured out something was wrong when he started asking questions and hung up. But I think the grandma might not have done that, or the grandpa. Ms. Helm, you testified about some of the ways scammers have ruined lives. What should people know about the dangers of AI-generated scams?
Yes, when my mother went through her scam, this was right before AI exploded. So they used very archaic tools of video of a man in a dark room, and they would voice over the actor in the video. And they were actually pretty convincing, enough to convince my mom to give $350,000 away. But with artificial intelligence, this is going to explode. They are so convincing, and they've got money to back people up to make these scams even more convincing. They'll send you a $100,000 check, and it'll cash.
makes you think we should be doing some rules of the road on AI, which we've had a bipartisan effort going on. And one of my biggest fears of this is just the scams that are going to affect individual people. Senator Blackburn and Senator Coons and Tillis and I have worked on deepfakes, but we have to make sure this incorporates some of these scams going forward. What we do, Ms. Gunther, do you want to add anything on AI?
Yeah, so with artificial intelligence, it is very scary. We're seeing them adopted. We're getting calls, hearing from our members where they're cloning voices. It's very difficult to use AI to detect that. And so that's why it's really important to have other tools as well. Not only do banks need to adopt artificial intelligence, but they need to do it at a faster pace. But they also have to use other tools in the bucket as multi-factor authentication as well.
Thank you.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to each of you, thank you for being here. Ms. Helm, I thank you for weighing in and working with us as we developed the romance scam bill that we've been moving forward with at Commerce Committee.
Thank you.
I appreciate your input on that. You know, one of the things we realized was the entry point for a lot of these scams and these financial crimes are the dating apps, and especially the dating apps for seniors. And so when you talk about an entry point, that seems to have been it. But what we have learned, and Mr. Chairman alluded to this in his opening, these are really transnational organizations. And, pardon me, this is a big business. And I know U.S. consumers lost, the estimate is $1.3 billion last year in these scams. But that is what is reported. And we know many of these don't get reported because of embarrassment or they figured it out, but they've already lost several $1,000s in the process. And as we were working on our legislation, what we found is that some of these sophisticated transnational criminal organizations will actually promise people that they will get them to another country, many times the U.S., for high-paying jobs. But what actually happens is it's a form of human trafficking tied to it. They're brought here, and then they're placed in what are called fraud dens. And in these fraud dens, they work the internet, they work the phones, and they create these relationships, and then they are scamming people out of hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and telling these individuals that they were going to bring to the U.S. and people that they're trafficking that they have to work out their debt. So that's how they keep them in these dens. But Mr. Fenta, I want you to speak for a minute about these transnational organizations and what we know about them and their underpinning as it relates to these crimes.
Thank you, Senator. These TOC, transnational organized crime groups, they're not really any different than the Mexican cartels, the TOC East groups doing cyber crimes. They're configured relatively similarly, particularly in the way they launder the money. So one thing that we noticed doing elder fraud investigations is that a lot of the money that we were tracing through these accounts was also in the same accounts with proceeds from narcotic sales, human trafficking, all kinds of other crimes. So it's not necessarily about the crime as much as the criminal groups. So we have the sophistication in our government and in our private industry to do these investigations if we coordinate them and work them together to have more effect. I think it's more a function of us choosing how to do that as opposed to letting the crooks choose, because they're plenty sophisticated. We need to be at that same level.
Yes, and I think, and you alluded to this earlier, as we have worked on the Kids Online Safety Act and worked with industry and worked with parents, we've seen some of this skill set develop, and it could be transferred over. Mr. Burku, I want to ask you, and thank you for the work you've done on tracing the illegal phone calls, the robocalls, and those things. Talk a little bit about traceback, and give me an example of where traceback and or a cross-sector collaboration has led to a criminal conviction and to unraveling part of this network.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we'd love to see more of our work lead to criminal convictions. That's where we just really think that needs to be a priority. Where a lot of our work, so we trace the calls, we get examples from illegal calls, referrals from law enforcement, data we source ourselves, working with financial institutions, tech companies, others, and we'll trace that back to the source. And basically, we see 8 to 10 different voice service providers touch that call along the way. And so that's why we need traceback to find out where it really came from, who made the call. So that's the traceback effort. It's been very successful in civil enforcement. Where we'd love to see it amped up is in the criminal side.
Okay, let me ask you this. With Wi-Fi calling, have you been able to follow any on Wi-Fi calling? And if someone's using a VPN, does that obstruct your work? So
for us, yeah, our focus, if it hits the public telephone network, we trace it back. If it's purely over the top, like a WhatsApp call, that would be outside the scope of what we do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much. I just want to flag for any Rhode Islanders who might be listening that if you're getting texts and emails that say you owe a toll and that proceedings are about to begin against you because of unpaid tolls or tickets, consider that to be a scam and be very wary about clicking onto any link in that text that purports to be the way that you're going to pay off the unpaid toll or ticket, and know instead that this is almost certainly a scam. The Department of Motor Vehicles and the Rhode Island Bridge and Turnpike Authority have both put out notices that these are not their way of dealing with customers who owe the money. And so when you see that, be very, very wary. That's my public service announcement for the day. I'd also like to put into the record the story of a Rhode Islander who was the victim of a romance scam and lost a great deal of money to a scammer who was sentenced to serve 121 months in prison by then Chief Judge Jack McConnell in Rhode Island. It is hard to overstate what happens to an elderly person who is both betrayed by someone who she thought was a romantic interest, who she thought was a friend, who she had come to count on, and then also to come back from that and find that her finances are in complete disarray, and she's going to have to really rethink what the rest of her life looks like, that it's going to change her entire financial position going forward. So I ask unanimous consent to put that
without objection in
the record. One of the things that helps the fraudsters is anonymity. That is very often provided by VPNs or by fake names. Very often the big platforms have a role in all of this, and we don't have a whole lot of time right now, but I really would be grateful if each of you, if you have thoughts about what the best things that we could do to penetrate the anonymity where it is a part of the scam, and to figure out how to hold the platforms more accountable for supporting these frauds, I would be grateful, because I think, this has been a good hearing, Mr. Chairman. It's been very bipartisan. Everybody has constituents who are being scammed by these predatory folks. Some of them are from overseas. When I was U.S. Attorney, we had what they called 419, I think they called them scams, where like a Nigerian minister suddenly discovered that he had $4 million squirreled away and just needed to get your account information so he could store it in your account, and you'd get $2 million of the $4 million, and he'd get the $2 million. It was going to be a great deal. All you had to do was give him all your bank information. Yeah, how did that work out? So the more we can drill into who is really behind these things, the trick with those is trying to figure out who was at the other end of it. And the Secret Service did a pretty good job of investigating, but now anonymity is even worse. And therefore, these frauds are practiced more prevalently and with less accountability. So your thoughts on dealing with the anonymity problem and how we can break through that to find the perpetrators more regularly, I'd really be grateful for, and thank you for the hearing, Chairman. Question for the record, we'll call that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank all of our witnesses. Clearly, scamming elders has been going on for way, way too long. And I think they are a particularly vulnerable group of people because perhaps part of it is that, one, they may have resources, but two, they may be trusting. They may be trusting. I remember telling my mom, who lived with us, that if anyone ever calls, to not respond to them, and she said, "But that's very rude." I said, because I told her, "Why don't you have to just hang up?" She said, "That's very rude." I said, "Well, then just say no, thank you, and hang up." But I think that the fact that they're very vulnerable is. One wonders what more we can do. I think there's more, of course. So I think there's bipartisan support for the idea that we should work together to combat this type of targeted fraud. But it's pretty much all kinds of fraud that has to do with financial fraud. And the thing is that it bothers me that in February the CFPB was effectively shut down. And as we know, CFPB educated Americans about scams and responded to complaints, and it returned over $21 billion from basically financial scams. So this is not a time to be shutting down a very effective agency, and that's probably maybe one of the reasons that it's being shut down. And then in April, the DOJ announced that it was disbanding its National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team and would no longer target crypto mixing services that criminals used to launder the proceeds of their scams. And I led a letter to the DOJ asking for a briefing on this topic, but have received no answer. And we know that there are these crypto ATMs that are very busy scamming money from unsuspecting people. So there's a lot going on, and hearing from all of you, I was particularly interested in Ms. Gunther saying that, and you represent AARP. Now, that is one group that spends a lot of time informing your members about these kinds of scams. But you mentioned that there is more that the financial industry can do to alert people. Could be alerting their relatives that their parents are being scammed, or whatever. And you said that Australia had done something, had enacted legislation to enable financial institutions to put holds on what could be raise red flags. Can you tell us more about what Australia has done?
Yeah, absolutely. Australia is a great, promising practice. It's been in the last year or two that they've put this together. They've done kind of what we've all been talking about here today, which is a coordinated national response. But it's also bringing all of the players in the ecosystem, every point of the scam, of the journey of the scam for a consumer, whether that's telecom, social media, the financial industry, tech companies, all together to make them responsible. Because I think we're looking just at the end point, which is the financial industry. And to your first part of your question, is that the financial industry, their arms are tied because they're not able to, when they teller sees, hey, this is suspicious, there's a red flag here, they're not able, and that person still wants their money because of old regulations, they have to process that in about half of those states. Half the states don't have the ability to hold.
So do the other witnesses agree that this is something we can look at doing, following what Australia is doing to bring a lot of people together? In fact, Mr. Burke, I think you said that there should be a nationally coordinated response to these kinds of scams. So would you agree that would all of you agree that, you know, we need to focus on what's happening to our elders and put together a national response? Would you all agree that that would be a good thing? And it would probably require legislation.
I mean, I can say I agree. I think there's a lot of work the industry is doing. There's little segments of work that's across it, but I think we need a government-led national strategy that's in coordination with the private sector. Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay. I did have one last question for Ms. Helm. It sounds as though your mother, not only was she scammed by this romance scam, but even when she knew that this was a scam, she still continued to want to participate. So there's a whole psychological aspect to this kind of scam that we need to also address.
That's the biggest riddle of this whole thing. I could not get my mother to stop. And all the families I speak to, about 90% of them email me or call me and say, how can I get my family member to stop? And that's the answer that keeps me up at night. I don't have an answer. I know we do need more therapists who are aware of the problem. And there is one therapist in particular, Kathy Wilson, out of Littleton, Colorado, who is putting a program together to teach other therapists about the emotional impact of romance scamming.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This concludes our hearing. I want to thank all of you folks for the hard work you put into it and the time you spent being here to share your personal experience and the expertise. And your perspectives are pretty darn important to everybody that gets hurt by these crimes. Now we have a process for written questions. They can be submitted for the record for 1 week from today. And then for you witnesses for answering these written questions, we'd like to have you 2 weeks after you receive them, if you could get it back to us. Thank you all very much.